All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on the Black Experience. Today, y'all, I have a very special guest with me joining me today on the Black Experience. She is part of the larger Western community and specifically the director of the Multicultural Center Services for students here at Western. Let's put our hands together and let's bring up Amy Westmoreland.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that introduction. I'm happy to be here. This is really wonderful. I'm glad that you invited me. And yeah, I look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you for taking the time to, out of your busy days. I mean, how many, you had like 20 meetings already today almost?
Not quite 20, but I usually have about 5 to 6 meetings per day on
Hmm.
top of just trying to get through everything else. But,
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's a variety of things throughout the day. I enjoy that. So
Hmm.
it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say like you've kind of gotten just accustomed and used to that busyness of life? Is
Yeah,
that
it's
relevant?
it's a it's a quick pace. I feel
Hmm.
like I'm shooting off emails really quickly. I try to be in these spaces and engage as much as I can.
Hmm.
Trying to be in the multicultural center as much as I can to kind of see what's going on with programming and whatnot. There's always something different every single day.
Hmm.
I love it. It's a lot to juggle, but it's really one of those things that drives me. If I had a 9 to 5 where I knew everything that would happen every single day and had to come into that, that gets boring.
Yeah.
This keeps you on your toes, it keeps you young,
Yeah.
and it also keeps you educated about stuff.
Mm.
There are things that I learn about every single day from our students, from our staff, from our faculty, from our community. It's pretty wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I actually never thought about it that way because I mean, growing up, I've always thought like teachers, anyone that works with students on
Hmm.
any level has to have a lot of patience. Even as college students can be a kind of a mess sometimes,
Yeah.
but also just they have to be somewhat passionate about what they're doing
Yeah.
to be dealing with kids like that.
Definitely. You have to know why you're doing this work. You have to know your values, and you
Mm.
have to understand that a lot of the stuff that's going on, it's not personal. I think that is one of the things that I've had to tell myself. There are structures in place. There are things that you're doing in a system of higher education that frustrate our students, that cause issues. And a lot of times that stuff is directed towards me, towards the multicultural student services. But I think it's a greater indicator of what our campus needs to be doing. And so, not taking it personally has been a journey for
Mm-hmm.
me, but it's also been a lifesaver. It's one of those things where I have to reflect on this is about making sure the students have what they need, that
Mm-hmm.
also includes going through the conflict. And so, it's
Wow.
a part of the job.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Amy, let's kick it off with a little bit about your background. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about kind of where you're from originally
Hmm.
and what growing up looked like for you.
Um, Originally born and raised Racine, Wisconsin. I'm one of three. I'm the youngest. I'm also a Sagittarius. So if you all wanted to know
Is
about
that
that,
what's it called? The
Centaur,
no, the thing when people look into that
astrology.
astrology. There we go.
Yes. I mention it because if you look up the definition of a Sagittarius, you basically know who I am. So that one's always fun. My mom and dad, Rosalinda Salinas Penidas Westmoreland, from Racine, Wisconsin as well, born in Crystal City, Texas, Mexican American. And then my dad is black, and he was born in Racine, Wisconsin, Robert Dennis Westmoreland.
Wow.
And they're both right now living in Florida, which is interesting. And they are raising my twin nephews, who are 14 years old. And yeah, so
Mm.
born and raised Racine, graduated from UW Madison. Um, that kind of informs a lot of my understanding about race, a lot of my understanding about what it means to be black in the Midwest, what it means to be Mexican in the Midwest. Went to UW Madison as a Big Ten institution, so at that point, over 40,000 students. At that point, 2% of those students identified as black.
Oh
We're
man.
still at a pretty consistent rate with that, even in 2024.
Mm.
Graduated with degrees in English and women's studies. And then kind of took a random journey. For 3 years, I worked at Capital Newspapers. I was an advertising sales assistant. Not really my dream job, but it was a job. I think as a lot of our students
It
can
gets you
kind of,
money.
right? It gets you where you need to be. I was able to travel, went to Italy, went to Australia, really loved kind of seeing the world. And then came back and was like, all right, I got to do something different. I need to get back to what drives me. And what has always driven me is actually what my mom used to do. My mom was a teaching assistant. She worked at the MAC Center, which is an alternative high school for students. And she was a mentor, an advisor, somebody who was there to actually listen to the story of why those students were there, why students had to go through the alternative high school. And there were so many reasons. A lot of times what we do is label those students. We label those students as bad, or those students were not as good as. But a lot of times there's so many different circumstances that really require the student to have to find alternatives to traditional high school. Seeing her do that and seeing her support those students and seeing her listen to their stories and the way that they responded to her was a big drive of why I wanted to get into education in the first place. So I went back to that. I went back to what are the moments that really, really, ignited a passion in me. I thought about those moments that my mom would bring us to the alternative high school and we would just be sitting with the students, hanging out after school. I thought about those moments where I had volunteered with what they label as at-risk students. I thought about the moments where I was a writing fellow with the Summer Collegiate Experience, which was a summer bridge program for underrepresented students at UW-Madison, and how much I loved that. Like they were just starting their academic career. And many of them, actually most of them, are first generation. No idea what it's like to be on this campus of 40,000 people. How do you do this? And me as a junior and then senior, having some information and being able to help guide folks and helping them with their writing, I love that. I loved being able to be a resource. And so going back to that, I decided to go for my master's degree. And I have my master's in higher education administration from Penn State.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, you're educated and accredited. That's beautiful. Wow.
I am. I will not say those were easy journeys. My master's degree specifically was not an easy journey.
I can't imagine it is. Yeah.
I really struggled. I struggled to get my thesis done. I also had family things that were going on that required me to come back home. So I had to finish my thesis while at home and dealing with some family crisis stuff. That was not one of the highlights of my journey. So when I think back to my master's degree, and when I think of many times the stories that I hear from our students of how they've struggled, I personally understand that. I may not understand the exact circumstance, but I understand what it means to struggle through your academic career.
Absolutely. Let's, right before we started the podcast, I remember we were kind of talking about college today compared to college, at University of Wisconsin-Madison, where you went, years ago. What's that difference that you see, I guess, between your college experience versus what you're seeing now here at Western?
Yeah, I think there are very distinct differences. So I went, I shouldn't tell you the year, but I'm going to tell you the year. I started at UW-Madison in 2002, and I graduated in 2006. Over 20 years have passed.
It's still pretty recent.
You're nice. It's recent, but it's also two decades have passed. And huge events socially and throughout the world have taken place. We've gone through and continue to be in a pandemic. There's a lot that has changed. And our students have changed because of it. I think the differences that I see, and honestly, I think these are really great differences, is that a lot of our students are advocating for themselves right from the get-go. A lot of our students know that their voice matters as soon as they step onto this campus. And that is powerful, and it's really wonderful to see our students exercise that. But I will say the other piece of this is that coming out of COVID, coming out of kind of the isolation, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but there is a difference in how our students communicate, how our students connect with each other. I think there is specifically an avoidance when it comes to conflict, that our students are not so much engaging in dialogue with each other, but more so throwing words out, more so debating. And so I think because we've been in such a bubble, we really need to exercise those muscles again of actual dialogue and discourse.
Yeah, because we got so used to that Zoom era that talking to a little small screen of somebody, and it was quite a time. And speaking of COVID, Amy, first of all, I guess, because you came in 2021, 2022.
Yeah.
It was my third year. I remember meeting you initially because I was the BSU president, and you were in those little meetings that we would do bi-weekly or weekly with all the other club leaders. And I was like, wow, okay, this is a point person that I can talk to for resources and stuff. What was it like coming in to a room full of people with masks on and in a new state and place?
Yeah. I don't think many people realize that I just picked up and left Pennsylvania and came here, and that's actually the first time that I've been in person is when I got here.
Wow.
So I returned to work through this position. I had been working from home since March of, I don't even remember, 2020.
2020.
So it was a huge transition. One, I have lived in the Pacific Northwest, but I've never been here. I didn't actually visit during that time because they weren't flying folks out for interviews. So it was all brand new. It was a huge transition. I'm thousands of miles away from any family as well. So it was a lot. It was a lot. One of the things you should know about me, though, is that I am fairly adventurous. I love a challenge. I love adventure. I love the unknown. And so it fed some of that for me. Being able to be in a space to hear from our students about what's going well, but also what's lacking here, was important to me. And when I interviewed for this position, I was well aware that there were things that were lacking. I made sure that the questions that I asked were questions that I really needed to have some sort of answer to. It is no secret to me during that interview process that there was a lot going on at Western when it comes to supporting BIPOC students. And by a lot going on, I mean there were no real structures in place beyond the Ethnic Student Center and beyond the newly created Black Student Coalition that really centered our students with marginalized identities, specifically our BIPOC students. Most universities have had some sort of cultural center, some sort of identity centers for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So for me, I knew it was going to be a challenge. I did not come into this thinking that it was going to be easy. And in hearing from our students, it was very evident to me that there were a lot of issues at play. We're in the Pacific Northwest. There is a niceness that is pervasive here. And I think many times folks, specifically our white communities, operate in that niceness. And because they're nice, you can't question beyond that. So the niceness is really a defense mechanism. It really doesn't allow you to dig deeper. we have to look at what it means to not just be nice, but what it means to be anti-racist.
Mm. Now, that's powerful.
Mhm.
When you say being nice, like, I guess, like, what is, like, an example? Is it like someone comes at you and is like, they're not blatantly racist to you,
Mhm.
but they're just put on a smile? Like, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, there's so many levels of what it means to be nice. There's that interpersonal level, the individual level of what it means to be nice. Hi, I'm here. I love that you're here. You're great. All of these accolades and so on and so forth. I will never challenge you or any of your thoughts because I am a good person and you're a good person. And so you shouldn't ask me any deeper questions type of nice.
Mm.
I put a Black Lives Matter sticker on my window, so you shouldn't question whether or not I actually
So
believe
therefore, I'm
that.
good. It clears me.
Yes, I'm
Right.
good.
Right.
There's that. There's kind of, again, the Black Lives Matter sticker on windows, but also not valuing your customers at your stores that have this, following your customers at these stores, not valuing your community in general, and there's that at play as well. But then I think about the institutional systems. I think about Western and Western's niceness. Um, Niceness is we have a budget and we will redo this space for you so that you're no longer in a basement.
And that completed my freshman year, I believe,
Mhm.
2019.
But niceness does not actually create a structure of belonging and inclusion. A space is just a space. Until you actually look at what are the policies, the procedures, the structures in everyday life that our students face that we need to be addressing systemically, that moves beyond niceness. Niceness are those placating things. So a space is a placating thing. It can mean a lot in some ways, but if you don't fill that space, if you don't address the other pieces that need to go along with that space as well, then you're really just performing niceness.
Wow.
You're not performing, you're not changing. And so my perspective is that we really need to be changing things. We need to be putting action behind things. Niceness allows us to rest on just that versus action, which requires you to dig deeper than niceness.
Now, do you? What was the initial motivation to come to Western? Was it like, because obviously
Yeah.
you saw the need,
Yeah.
but how did you even find the opportunity, which is all the way on the West Coast?
Yeah. So you're going to ask me about advice to younger generations soon because we talked about this. And one of those pieces of advice would actually be always have a pulse of what's going on. Just because I'm happy in a position doesn't mean I always have to be in that position. Get to know what's out there. What are the skills that you bring, the experience that you bring that you think may be valuable in other spaces, and can they use those in those other spaces? And would you be happier there? For me at Penn State, I was fine doing what I was doing. I was the director of assessment for the Office of the Vice Provost for Educational Equity. Um, it was okay, but I missed being by the ocean. I missed building. I missed building programs. I missed students and student contact. Like I was mostly working with professional staff members in my previous position, and it just wasn't as fulfilling. I wasn't able to be creative. I wasn't able to really think about how we're providing resources for our students directly. And so I wanted to get back to that because in roles that I had previous to that, I was able to do so. So I missed those aspects. And so when I saw this position come up, I read through the position description. I saw that it allowed me to not only work directly with our students, but also to address institutional policies and procedures that were barriers to access for our students. That balance of things was really something that I was looking for. So I was like, all right, this is a challenge. We'll do this.
Yeah,
I'm in.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And again, like you came during such a pivotal moment
Yes.
where we were still in the pandemic, and now we're what, like 3 years removed from
Hmm.
that first year or something like that. How how's the experience been? Has each year been easier for you to kind of do your job and kind of get accustomed to the way that Western does things?
Well, I think I kind of got caught in the pattern of a lot of different DEI, ADEI spaces of throw a person at a problem. And so the first year to 2 years felt, no, first year to year and a half felt very much so like I was a person being thrown at a problem. And I think that realistically, that was because I didn't have staff. It took a really long time for me to be able to hire folks into spaces that I really needed people to be in. I just was able to hire Simone, who is our assistant director within the within the Multicultural Student
Is she a
Services.
student?
No, Simone
No.
is a professional staff member.
Okay.
She's the assistant director of Multicultural Student Services. She's been amazing. She used to be a student here, and she also used to be a professional staff member here, and supporter of NASU as a advisor as well. She has some really wonderful experience, but I wasn't able to hire her until she just started this year in January. I've been here
Yeah.
since November of 2021. That's how long it took for our processes for me to be able to get somebody on campus.
It's almost 3 years.
Yes.
Wow.
So not only was I expected to build, but I'm also expected to kind of be on the front lines with our students as well. And so you can't require that of one person. These one person offices that we're trying to build are never going to be successful because it takes a campus, one, to invest, and it takes people trained in knowing how to do this to also support those services. So those first the first year was tough. I really wanted to take time to get to know the campus. I really wanted to take time to kind of get my own foundation. I wasn't provided that because there was a lot of stuff that happened and that I needed to address and be there to help support, to move through it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so it was difficult. It was very difficult.
Absolutely.
I think if there's ever a trait that I do really love about myself, it's adaptability. You can put me in any situation, I'll be okay. So I think that was the strength that came out in this was that I was able to be adaptable to the situation, even though it was hard. It was emotional. There was a lot going on, and I didn't have anybody here. So
Here we
yeah,
are.
here we
Here
are.
we go.
Now I think I have a team of wonderful people who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis that we can be sounding boards for each other, collaborators with each other. I have community and departments and colleges that we're collaborating with on a daily basis to do different programs and provide these resources to our students. I see our students thriving as well.
Yeah.
And they are participating in these spaces. And I think there's a building of a culture of support that we didn't see before. It's slow building, and it takes 3 to 5 years to change a culture. We're not at year 3 yet, so I think we're
You're getting
getting
there.
there. We're
Absolutely.
slowly getting there.
I'm the same way. Every time I see, because I follow ACC, the African Caribbean Club,
Mhm.
and the BSU on Instagram, and the way the consistency, just how many people attend their meetings, the fun meetings,
Yes.
the interactions and the collaborations with other clubs that they do. I'm like, this was it. This was summer of 2021. It was just me on the board. The rest of the board was either graduating or just didn't want to do it for next year.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? The vision is we want to get BSU back. We want to get ACC back. We want to
Mm-hmm.
get, and that first year, ACC was not a thing.
Yeah.
Nesby was having a
Mm-hmm.
hard time finding members, but
Mm-hmm.
like you, like when I look at it now, I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Now we have a BSC, we have a coalition group,
Yeah.
we have a space, but then also in that space is actually people and things are happening in that space, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's a
definitely.
celebration.
It is a
Absolutely.
celebration. And I also want to be very clear because there's going to be conflict in those spaces as well.
Mm.
And I think one of the things that folks need to understand about a space like the ESC, about multicultural student services in general, is that it's a community of people. Anytime you have a community of people coming together, there's always going to be something that happens, a disagreement. Folks are not gonna align in their values, so on and so forth. And so one of the things that we're also learning to do in these spaces is move forward as a community. Like, what does it look like for us to restore things in these spaces? What does it look like for us to actually dialogue through our conflict instead of being fractured all of the time? Um, but the reality is, you have multiple different identities in these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, there's going to be conflict. We have to be able to use these spaces to get back together.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to do some of that. And I want to shout out some of the folks who have helped us in kind of navigating some of that as well. So we've worked with the Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center, who has done some really great work with our community in the ESC, to kind of help navigate how do we get back to a place of community that actually is centered on the values of the ESC. And we've been trying to make that happen
Yeah.
as well.
Now I'm curious. Speaking of conflict, Amy,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your first year as well as even last year, there was a huge conflict with a club that was wanting to join the ESC,
Yes.
and that was a whole thing. How did you deal with that conflict, and what was like your first impressions, and then what were your thoughts about that whole thing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to dig into, and I don't know if we have enough time for that, but there's a lot to dig into that with that. What I can say about what happened in those spaces is that I don't think we as an institution are prepared for how to help folks navigate through conflict. And I think it took us some time to really figure out what we needed to be doing. Me, as somebody who is new here and
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what are the resources, it's surprising to me that there is a lack of resources specifically around conflict and conflict management. We don't have an ombudsperson, which is a person who helps kind of work through conflict,
Mm-hmm.
interpersonal conflict. Um, there really wasn't anything that we could do here to make it, at least there wasn't any tools that we could use, any instruments that we could use, anything built into the institution that we could use
Right.
to really help us kind of manage what that looked like. And so I think it took on a life of its own and became this huge thing. Um, you know, we were trying to help students navigate it, but again, as somebody who is new, it's also complicated to know the historical elements of all of that as well. And without a lot of that knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult.
It
So,
is.
yeah, I can't give you like a very clear and thought out answer about that, but to be fully transparent, it was difficult.
Yeah.
I think all of us experience kind of some emotional response to that. I know for me, I took on a lot of guilt. I took on a lot of feelings of failure in that case as well. Um, I never want to see our students be harmed. I never want to
Yeah.
create a space of harm. And so it hurt to see that there was a space that was specifically supposed to center BIPOC communities that
Mm-hmm.
turned into a harmful experience for our students.
Mm-hmm.
And that I participated in that, or at least, yes, to take responsibility, I participated in that. And so that was very difficult.
Hmm. I mean, you acknowledging that is a big thing too.
Yeah.
And so, it was something I've never experienced, and I at the time when I was part of BSU, I did the best thing I could was just show support
Hmm.
and say, hey, listen, this is something that we'll have to it will take time, to resolve, because it's not just a one night thing where it's like, okay, overnight in one meeting we're gonna resolve everything now.
Yeah.
So.
The other difficult piece of that situation is that there were policies and procedures that had historically been used within the ESC
Hmm.
that I didn't know to question as well. And so I think, again, when I say that there are niceties that happen in these spaces, I think one of the niceties was, here's this space, go do what you want to do. But we also have to provide support. And part of support is reviewing policies and procedures to say, is this actually in line with what the university wants? Um, what are the legalities here? And how do we actually do this so that we're really centering our students and support of them? I don't think a lot of that happened in this space. And
Hmm.
so, with the ESC having a lot of folks kind of go through that space as professional staff members, I think there were like at least 5 or 6 professional staff members that have gone through that space in a very short period of time. Um, the lack of support really created a space that,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know, that happened.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And now the only thing we can do is turn to the future and say,
we're
let's
trying.
make it better.
Hmm.
You know. And speaking of making it better,
Hmm.
Amy, I introduced you as you are the director of the Multicultural Services Center,
Multicultural student services.
Student
Hmm.
Services, here at Western.
Hmm.
Kind of because we've talked a lot about these issues and problems and stuff that we can work on here at Western. Kind of, how does your position kind of, or is there anything that you're involved with right now that's building towards that
Yeah.
better future?
Um, so when I first got here, it was just multicultural student services. One of the things that has happened over the course of that time is, in 2022, we developed what was the ADE&I unit, Access, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion unit, um, but is now the Centers for Student Access, um, for Community and Intercultural Engagement. And that space includes the Disability Access Center as well as LGBTQ plus Western, and multicultural student services. I mention that because this is a powerhouse of services. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was make sure that we're intersectional in the work that we're doing. That it's not just about race, it's about race and sexuality and about disability. It's about the many different layers of people. And so, one of the things that we tried to do is really collaborate in a lot of the programming that we're doing. Think about how are we being inclusive of different identities, centering marginalized identities, specifically BIPOC identities, QTPOC identities in the work that we are doing. Um, and it's been really beautiful to do this work. My colleagues are super invested in the things that they are doing. Leetov Langley is the assistant vice president for that space. Johan is the director of LGBTQ plus Western. We have Joseph, who is the director of Disability Access Center. We really try to be in a communication with each other to make sure that we're building things that reach many of our students,
Hmm.
and don't isolate them in the identities that they carry. So, what does it mean to be Black and disabled? We need to have that conversation because we have Black disabled students here on this campus and staff and faculty on this campus. And if we're not having that conversation, then are we actually including them in this space?
Right.
Um, One of the things that we're working on are different trainings that we provide
Hmm.
through our unit. So, identifying, being an upstander, and identifying biases that's going on, and how do you report that bias, and how do you make sure that it's not always on the person experiencing it to do or say something. Um, Having different lunch and learns that we do on Wednesdays at noon in the Multicultural Center. And those topics vary. So we had Teresa Sheldon here, who is the director of the Native American boarding school reconciliation space, and talked about what it means to be Native, and what are some of the historical things that have happened to that community, and how do we provide more space to talk about that, and how do we actually uplift our communities. We had Johan hosted a session about Janelle Monáe and Afrofuturism. It was wonderful, learned so much from that, but all of these spaces allow for different topics to be centered, allow for different identities to be centered, and allow for folks to learn about ways to support communities. We also have Heritage Months that we're planning and that we've been doing over the course of the last couple of years.
Is the Heritage Dinner happening this spring?
Which Heritage Dinner?
There's like an annual one they do every spring. They haven't done it ever since I've been here.
Which one is that?
It's like a whole ESC thing. I think a bunch of the clubs come in.
Yeah, so not that, but eventually we will have a conference. It's going to be a conference that we're going to be doing soon. But no, what we've been doing is so all of the different heritage months that take place. So you have Latina Heritage Month, you have Native American Heritage Month, Black History Month, all of the different months. We've been pulling together committees to really plan those and make sure that there are acknowledgments of those months. Not saying that's the only time that we really want to celebrate those identities, but knowing that that was something that was missing here. We weren't really doing anything around those months, and it was important to folks to be able to have that. There's so much that we're doing as far as trainings of, showing up and doing trainings for RA staff, inclusion assistants, in the writing studio. There's so much that we're a part of, and really trying to, again, educate our community on what it means to be more inclusive and welcoming, but also centering our community, specifically of disabled, QT-POC, BIPOC students.
Beautiful. A lot of work. And
there's a lot.
You just had lunch with the
Melinda,
vice president of
yes.
Western, Melinda Husky, so I'm sure you're already talking to the Western board as a whole to make stuff happen.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because we are in a space where there's so many new resources that have been created that I think what we're trying to do right now is figure out how we all work together, and how we actually do this in alignment with each other. We have the Office of Equity, which was really just created within the last 2 years. Dr. Jacqueline Hughes as the Chief Diversity Officer. I know that she's working on things, and really what we're trying to do is build all around effective supports for faculty and staff, but also for our students, in creating that inclusive environment that we want to see.
Beautiful. Amy, to wrap up kind of the podcast, I love ending it with this question, but what advice would you give to the younger generation, the college student today, stepping in, it could any college student stepping into Western, into University of Wisconsin, Madison, anywhere, what advice would you give to that person?
I think the advice that I would give to younger generations would probably be that it's not linear. Your journey is not going to be linear. Your journey is going to be all sorts of things that you did not expect. Whether that is your professional career, whether that is your personal life, whether that is whatever it may be. Being prepared for that, it's going to happen. And so it's okay. It's okay if the plan that you had for yourself does not pan out the way that you wanted it to. It's okay if you have to take a detour every now and again. It's okay if you have to pause. I tend to think of kind of those moments where we can't do the thing where we want to do it, but we know it's going to be coming as a comma in the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comma. It's not a period.
Mm-hmm.
Like you will the sentence will continue.
It will continue, yeah.
You will be able to do those other things. You just need to give yourself time. When I graduated from UW-Madison, I did not go directly into a master's program because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did not have my dream job. I took what was there, and it felt at that point like a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like I had let somebody down. I didn't though. Like it was a part of the path. I needed that experience in order to get to where I was going to go. So even those things that it feels like you are not doing the thing that you want to do, that pressure, allow some of that pressure to come off of your shoulders. It's okay.
Yeah.
It is okay. The path that I have taken to now be at this point is not the path that I envisioned, and I'm okay with that. And I'm excited about the path for the future because I know it's not going to be how I imagine it at all. And that's all right.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I had envisioned I would go to UW. My parents had envisioned that too. And UW Seattle didn't accept me. And I was left with Western and a few other schools, and here I am now. And I could not have pictured COVID to happen.
Right?
And
But
this whole thing.
what did you do with that experience at Western though? Like that's the thing. Like, would you have been the president of a BSU at UW? Would you have had this opportunity to do this podcast in this space? Like, would that even be something that you would be interested in? Like that journey, your journey here has been such an incredible journey. I only know bits and pieces of it, but I do know that people come to you. You just said this. People come to you and say, I remember you from that BSU meeting. I do know that students look at you and are like, that's a leader. That's somebody that I want to be able to do the things that he's done as well. Those things matter more so than the school title.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, absolutely. They do. And when you put it into that perspective, I don't usually think like that, but I'm like, man, yeah, life is quite a journey.
Yeah.
And you kind of
It
just
is.
have to sometimes go with the flow and kind of just go where it takes you. And I'm not a believer in coincidences anymore too. So
Yeah.
I believe everything does happen for some reason, but
It usually does. At least I've noticed that it usually does happen.
you're just
for
able to
some
connect
sort
the
of reason.
dots when you look back
Right?
too.
It's
So,
like you just need time to
Yeah.
connect those dots. So, yes,
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
thank you so much, Amy,
Yes,
for
of course.
hopping on the podcast.
Great.
If people want to kind of talk to you more about some of the things you said here, get more advice from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm located up in the VU on the 7th floor, so VU 751. I try to have my office door open as much as possible if I'm not in meetings, but folks can also email me. If you look on our website, my email is there as well. I think email's probably the best way to get a hold of me so that we can set up a meeting and a time to just chat. I meet with students quite often. So students either pop in or they set up meetings and we just chat about life. So yeah, more than happy to do that.
Beautiful. And I'll drop her email link, guys, in the description once this episode drops. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, took some things away. Make sure to love yourself, guys, and help each other out as usual. And we'll catch y'all on the very next one. Until next time, guys. Peace.